Hello and good morning. This morning I'm speaking to my HAPVA survey class. Welcome. I am actually today doing things a little bit backwards, touching my face. I can't help it. Um, I am actually speaking to my HAPVA survey class first, and then later on I'll be online talking to my AP Euro guys. But yes, first for you guys. So, uh, let's begin just by talking about the situation that we're in. I'm sure that you are sick to death of it. But uh, information is always good. Information is always good. And therefore, so what is the new information? I have to say that this morning, when I was coming in to Ryle, um, I was listening to the radio and struck by the news that the first Northern Kentucky patient of this virus um, has been identified. All that means is that there'll certainly be more, So once again, should you panic? No, you shouldn't panic, but you should also not tempt fate. I mean, basically, the answer to this is living, for lack of a better word, a clean life as much as you can. Washing hands, changing clothes often. My wife now makes me change clothes before I come in when I come in the house. You know, but yeah. So that's something we all need to do, and it depressed me for a while because now it's here. The good news, on the other hand, though, I don't know how much you pay attention to the news, is that today it was reported that there were no new cases in Wuhan, China, which is where the virus originated. So, that's good news. And I wish I could channel my inner Winston Churchill now. He was a great speaker and always found positivity in the darkest of days. And, and so remain calm and carry on as much as you can. So today we're going to be talking about about Martin Luther nailing 95 Theses on the wall of the church at Wittenberg and its ramifications going forward, which were just tremendous. I do, hope that you've seen my email that I sent out this morning. If you notice, I sent several URLs. One URL was just so that you would know where to go to subscribe to these lectures. Another one was a discussion. It's a YouTube discussion of Martin Luther's nailing the 95 Theses on the door of the Church of Wittenberg, a rather simplified thing, but simple is always good. And then finally, I'll try to, last summer, I watched the film Yesterday, and if you haven't seen that film, it's a wonderfully cheeky little film about this young man of Indian descent who lives in Britain, and through some circumstance, I am going to kill that light. I just hate that. It's stupid. Comedy, yes. This drives me nuts. This is another reason why I'm thinking about moving to my house. The lights at my house never do that. Anyway. And so, yeah, this film where this Indian person, he is in an accident, and he wakes up to find out that he is one of only a small handful of people who remember the Beatles. And so he goes about reproducing Beatles songs. And, if you never really listen to the Beatles, and I know I don't understand the music of today, and you have no idea what the attraction is of my music yesterday. But it's a good little film. It's a cheeky little film, humorous, and very well done. And so, yeah, if you get a chance while you're locked in, it's called Yesterday. It's a very good film. But anyway, so let's talk about Martin Luther going forward. Martin Luther nailed a list of 95 theses or objections. Oh, yes, what should you have? Well, of course, hopefully you have printed off your study guide, because boys and girls, one day there will be a test, and that test will be on Mastery Connect. And, the study guide makes it easy. Secondly, I do hope you have a writing implement, of course, whether it's a pen or not. That's entirely up to you. Thirdly, of course, come prepared. And last but not least, hand sanitizer. And of course, the morning pick-me-up. I just can't drink coffee, not on a sustained basis. But anyway, so yeah, Martin Luther nailed a list of 95 theses or objections to Roman Catholic Church practices in the most public place in the entire town of Wittenberg, which was the door to the church where all parishioners could see as they walked in. Now, notice the date that he nailed that on the door of the Church of Wittenberg was October 31st. October 31st, 1517. And I think the timing may not have been, the timing was probably not an accidental coincidence. You see, October 31st is in the Catholic Church a feast day. It is All Souls Day. It is the day when people in the Catholic Church remember the lives, the souls of their departed family members. The next day is All Saints Day. It is a day when it's a feast day for all the saints who have ever lived within the Catholic Church. So basically, he nails it on October 31st, and there are two feast days right in a row. It's basically a public declaration of war against the Catholic Church. And if Martin Luther had done this like Jan Hus did the same thing 100 years earlier. I don't know about nailing it on the door of the church, but Jan Hus said the exact same things 100 years earlier, and he got burned at the stake. Martin Luther, though, is helped by two things. Number one, he's helped by the printing press, which the printing press enables Martin Luther's words and his ideas to spread out really quickly, and people read them. And the other thing Martin Luther had on his side was, and probably the biggest thing, he had powerful friends. Powerful friends, the princes of northern Germany, who saw in Martin Luther, did they feel the way that Martin Luther did about the Roman Catholic Church? I guess you could only ask them about that. Or did they see in Martin Luther, who's talking about, reforming the Catholic Church, forcing the Catholic Church to make certain changes, such as taking all that money. Did they see in Martin Luther a chance to further their own political ends? Did they see in Martin Luther a chance to wrestle independence from Rome? I hate to be the skeptic here, but I think that, there's a good chance of that. So getting back to this, indulgences, obviously, were not the only objection that Martin Luther had to the Roman Catholic Church. Luther did not like the fact that only the clergy were able to read the Bible, as the Bible at the time was in Latin and not in the vernacular, which is a word that is on your next test, vernacular, Vernacular. Vernacular simply means the language of the common people, the language of Germany. And so Luther didn't like the fact that, the Bible was only written in Latin. a language that had not been spoken in Germany since the days of the ancient Romans. And so he didn't like that. Martin Luther said, and this is a bit of his big thing, and this is where I missed teaching you in class, because I would have wrote this up on the board. But if you understand this about Martin Luther, you understand Martin Luther. Martin Luther said that every man should be his own priest. Now, that is really a shot across the bow of the Roman Catholic Church. Every man should be his own priest, because you have to look at what life was like back then. And to be real honest, within the Roman Catholic Church today. And how that is this. As a person, a Catholic goes through his Christian spiritual life, he encounters seven things called sacraments. And these sacraments are observances, are rituals, are practices that Catholic people must do as they continue on their life, their journey towards hopefully going into heaven. So what are the sacraments? Oh, like I said, there's seven. There's the birth, the baptism at birth. There's First Communion, where there's confirmation. There is marriage. There is last rites. There is anointing of the sick. And, I know I've left out some, but just keep in mind two things. Number one, there's seven of them. And number two, to perform the sacraments, each one of them requires three individuals, or three parties to be present. Number one, the person who is who is receiving the sacrament. That's one. Number two, of course, God. And number three, the Roman Catholic Church. I always would put it on the board as a triangle, and so each corner of the triangle, person, Roman Catholic Church, and God. Now, what Martin Luther is saying, and here's this, what Martin Luther said, you don't need the Roman Catholic Church for this. You only need two elements, you and God. Every man is his own priest. And I mean, you might go, oh, okay, it's, I mean, that was once again really a shot across the bow, a giant punch at the Roman Catholic Church. Because think of it, if you don't need the Roman Catholic Church for the sacraments, and the sacraments are the things you need to get into heaven, and you don't need the Roman Catholic Church for the sacraments, then why do you need the Roman Catholic Church? Why do you... That is... Nothing like breaking one's chain of concentration, is there? Why do you need the Roman Catholic Church? And why do you need to pay them 10% of your income, or to do the things that the Roman Catholic Church says? So Martin Luther is basically cutting the legs out from under the entire power structure of the Roman Catholic Church. And the Roman Catholic Church is quick to pick up on that. Jan Hus said the same thing 100 years ago, and yeah, that's why he got burned at the stake. And so anyway, Martin Luther did not support the church and the sacraments. In fact, Martin Luther said that of the sacraments, only two, that means baptism and Holy Communion, were actually to be found in the Bible. So, Martin Luther said also that salvation is by faith and not works. You say, well, what does that mean? It means that Martin Luther says all you have to do is believe to be a Christian. All you have to do is believe. You believe. You don't have to go through these functions, these 7 sacraments. You just have to believe, and that's all. And so, once again, and if all you have to do is believe, then you don't need the priest. You don't need to, to be real honest, though, a criticism of what Martin Luther said, and, I'm not defending the Roman Catholic Church. I'm just trying to open up your mind to the whole religious argument. You also, and, don't go home and tell your mom is starting to say, I don't have to go to church now. Nowhere in the Bible, nowhere does it ever say that you need to go to church. So when Martin Luther says that just because something's not in the Bible, it's not necessarily the will of God, maybe he's right, and maybe he isn't so right. But anyway, Martin Luther did not support the church practicing sacraments. Like I said, he said only 2, baptism and Holy Communion, were actually mentioned in the Bible. Luther, prior to Martin Luther, remember that the age of faith had been a 3-sided arrangement. Oh, look, I wrote that down in your study guide. On the one side was the individual who valued above all things going to heaven, to relieve him of his dull, painful, and dreary existence, and that was true. On the other side was the promise of eternal bliss and comfort in heaven with Jesus. Linking these two was the Roman Catholic Church. What Luther had done now was to remove the Roman Catholic Church from that equation. What Martin Luther had done was very dangerous, as he immediately became wanted, literally a wanted person for the crime of heresy. Heresy. It's written there, Heresy. It's written in darkened letters there. Heresy. So what is the punishment for heresy? Punishment for heresy, as you all know, is that you are the guest of honor at a barbecue. And you'd be burned at the stake, just like Jan Hus had been 100 years earlier. So in 1521, Luther was threatened by Pope Leo X with, another word's going to be on your test, excommunication, if he did not recant. So you have 2 words there, excommunication and recant. What do they mean? Excommunication, and trust me, the Roman Catholic Church is not the only church that uses the word excommunication. The Amish, for example, and we're going to talk about the Amish a little bit later on, the Amish call it shunning, where simply everybody in the Amish community has nothing to do with that individual. Excommunication, though, in the Roman Catholic Church, actually, during this time, was a lot more serious. Excommunication meant that you were denied the sacraments. You were denied the sacraments. You could not go to church. You could not go to confession. Oh, yeah, confession is one of the sacraments. You could not confess your sins. You could not receive Holy Communion. Basically, it was like saying, go to purgatory and or hell. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200. That kind of thing. It was, a very serious thing, excommunication. So Luther was threatened with excommunication if he did not. The second word is recant, recant. It pays to increase your vocabulary. Recant means to say that, you know what I was saying before, I was making a mistake. I was wrong in what I was saying before. That is what the word recant means. And for example, a couple of centuries later, I don't know exactly the year, it might even be within 100 years, Galileo Galilei will write this book about how the sun is the center of the universe and how, the planets revolve around it and all those kind of things that today we think are, well, yeah. Well, the Roman Catholic Church didn't really like that, and so they forced Galileo to recant, to basically take it all back. And had he not taken it back, yes, they would have burned him at the stake. And so, yeah, that's what the word recant means. And so Luther was then compelled to appear before a church council that was what is it when somebody presided over by the Holy Roman Emperor. He was debated his position with several Roman Catholic Church officials at the Diet of Worms. D-I-E-T, Diet, and Worms, W-O-R-M-S. Sounds tasty, yes. A diet is a council, okay? And in fact, for example, the legislature of Japan is called a diet. Worms, W-O-R-M-S, which is actually how it's pronounced, is a town in Germany. So Luther had to appear before this council in a town in Germany where he debated his position. And at that meeting, Luther made his famous stand where he said, I have no choice here. Unless you can prove to me by the Bible or by reason or by divine providence that I am wrong, then I'm sorry. I'm going to stand behind what I feel. And that's how the debate ended. Now, here's the interesting thing. So Martin Luther then leaves the debate. And after he leaves, he is kidnapped. Yeah, remember, hopefully you watched that Rick Steve video. Martin Luther was kidnapped, but the kidnap was a ruse. The kidnapping was done by one of Martin Luther's friends and supporter, a German prince by the name of Frederick the Wise. And Frederick the Wise spirited Martin Luther away to his castle. And Martin Luther then spent the next year basically in hiding because there was a bounty on his head. And he stayed in hiding under, and I forget what the name of Martin Luther he assumed. He pretended to be a knight, and he lived in a very small room for a year to basically, because there was a bounty on his head. Anybody who could have snatched him up, he was an outlaw. One had a right to kill him, but they would have probably gotten a reward if they'd have dragged him back to Rome, where he could have been publicly burned to death. But yeah, while he was there, though, it was an important year. So it was an important year because Martin Luther, and this is on your test, Martin Luther used that year to take the New Testament first and then later the whole Bible, and he translated it from the original Greek and Hebraic text into German so that the average common German could read it. That was really, really, really critical. That's one of the reasons why the Protestant Reformation is so very important. Martin Luther translated the Bible into German. And since everyone who agreed with Martin Luther was interested in his own salvation, and Martin Luther said, hey, everybody's their own priest. To guarantee your own salvation, you had to find out what God said. How do you find out what God said? You have to be able to read the Bible. How do you read the Bible? Well, you have to be able to read. And so one of the biggest things that Martin Luther did, and the Protestant Reformation does, is that it really puts a jolt into education. Education, which before Martin Luther had been the provenance of just the religious, just the clergy. Now everybody, a lot more people had a reason to learn how to read so they could take care of their own salvation. Yes, so back to that hand. Because Luther and people like him, such as John Calvin, Minna Simons, and even good old Henry VIII of England, were protesting the policies and practices of the Roman Catholic Church, Luther's movement and others like it were called Protestant. And this period of splitting off of the Roman Catholic Church and dividing and subdividing again has been named by historians as the Protestant Reformation. Will you pardon me for a minute? Hey, good. This is terrible. You know, if somebody was intelligent, they would create a bunch of YouTube outtakes of my lectures at that exact moment. I mean, it's highly frustrating. I know it's supposed to save energy, but please. All right. Anyway, so yeah, these guys like Martin Luther, Henry VIII, John Calvin, who we'll study later on, they protested practices of the Roman Catholic Church, and therefore them and their followers were called Protestants. I'm about to sneeze. As it says there, Luther was protected by the princes of northern Germany, and while living upon under their protection, under the castle of Frederick the Wise, he took it upon himself to take the Bible, which at that time was written in Latin, a language that no one could read, and converted it into German. That, as you continue on the next page, that fit into Luther's philosophy, because if every man is responsible for his own salvation, then every man needs to know how to read. So, Luther believed that everyone should be able to communicate directly with God and not have a priest or a person of the church get on his God phone and contact him for the person. Luther composed a hymn, for example, Eine feiste Burg ist unser Gott, a mighty fortress is our God. Yeah, it was one of the earliest Christian hymns, Protestant hymns. This hymn utilized common popular melodies and could be sung by the common people, as opposed to Latin choirs that took, very skilled, very trained singers. This could be something we get sung by the common people. Once again, in keeping with Luther's idea of, the common man, religion being for the common man, salvation being for the common man. Luther also endorsed the translation and usage of the classic texts of Greek and Roman. Luther rejected the elaborate ceremony of the church for more simple piety, doing simple good deeds as opposed to just the sacraments. Now, in the art world, one of the things that happens that I really think is unfortunate, but what we're going to see during the Protestant Reformation is that the Protestants, like Luther, and his followers, will come up with this idea that, these Catholic churches, with all their accoutrements, all their statues, all their stained glass windows, all their beauty, and all their focus on creating this, very artistic, aesthetically pleasing environment, actually makes them focus not on God, but on the building. And so what many Protestants did when they began taking over these Catholic churches is that they totally destroyed, they racked them. They busted out the beautiful stained glass windows. They removed all the icons. They would paint over the mosaics, paint over the religious paintings, things like that, destroying some tremendous work of art. And so much so that it became really easy, and it's still, I won't say still is, but, fairly easy to discern what is a Catholic church from what is a Protestant churches. Protestant, plain. Catholic, really, really, really fancy. When I go to Europe, I really like going into the Catholic churches. In fact, around here, I like going into the Catholic churches. I'm telling you, if you want something to do quietly by yourself, even though you can't go to Mass at Catholic Church anymore, you are allowed to go into Catholic churches. And you can see, particularly the older Catholic churches, Down in Covington, Mother of God Catholic Church, which is so beautiful, and very few people go into it. Everybody always goes in to the cathedral, which looks like a Gothic cathedral we've talked about before. And yes, that's beautiful too. If you ever go to downtown Cincinnati, it's very much worth a visit to St. Peter in Chains. All of these churches are works of art. They're the most beautiful structures in this area, outside and inside as well. And so, yeah, but the Protestants felt that by focusing on all that art, that's what you were focusing. Sorry. That's what you were focusing on, and you were not focusing on what you should be focusing on, which was the worship of God. And so, yes. I want to finish this up for today. How did the Protestant Reformation aid the cause for education for the common man? I think we went over that. Yes, that you got to be able to read to know what your position is with God. To guarantee your own salvation, you have to know what God wants. So you read the Bible. However, Luther remained steadfast to many of the teachings of St. Augustine, rejecting the humanistic ideas of the Renaissance, feeling that humans could not achieve goodness through their own effort, and that human freedom led straight to damnation. Yeah. Yeah, the thing about, one of the things about the Protestant church is, Protestant church, and we'll see this going forward, Protestant churches will be kind of looked upon as you can't do that faith. Well, anyway, I am going to end here today for my arts and humanities classes. Take time to look at those videos. And like I said, yesterday I converted this test into Mastery Connect format, and I will be uploading that. And yeah, we will have a test. So, this time listening to these lectures is beneficial. And so with that, I'm going to say goodbye. Take care of yourself, and I will see you tomorrow.